and welcome to another session of ProutSpace. As you know, this is a bi-monthly session where we get together and discuss some PROUT topics in an open and interesting, hopefully interesting way. Today we have David and Suveda with us. They are a couple that have been working with community development for over 10 years. They have been working mainly with farmers, and this session will hear about their experience. We'll hear about their advice for those of us that also want to do similar work. So I'm very happy to welcome them. And without further ado, I'd just like to give them the word and let them start.
Can you please?
Thanks very much, Maheshwar. Yeah, it's David here, and Sue. I'll probably do the majority of the talking just because in our family I'm the main talker, but not the main worker, that's for sure. Welcome everyone. I'm in Australia and Sue is in Thailand. So we live in Australia, but for family reasons she's gone back to Thailand for a little while. But yeah, so welcome to the session, which I think we called kind of enabling change in communities. I'm going to share my screen, so we've got some pictures to look at, hopefully to prompt some conversation. So I'll just do that. Can you guys see that screen there? Someone give me the thumbs up.
Yes, yes.
Yep, thanks Mahesh. Yeah, so welcome everyone. I appreciate there's people from all around the globe. Today we'll just be sharing some stories of change in communities from our experience. So obviously we live in Australia mainly, although we also work in Thailand a bit with one of the projects we work on, and in the Pacific too. So I'll have a few experiences from there, but there'll probably be some differences to the communities you're working with, but I'm sure there'll also be some common elements. So the other thing, just to let everyone know, is that I've just this is my first day out of bed from COVID, and I haven't been pretty sick, so I haven't been able to prepare as well as I'd probably like. So if it's a little bit scratchy and it's not quite on as effective a presentation as what you might want, I do apologize for, I'm just having a bit of a heavy head getting everything ready for today. So let's see how we go anyway. So I guess the topic that we decided on with Maheshwara was enabling change in communities, and just to give you a little bit of background about us. So that's me standing in what's called a soil pit, not with the orange shirt on, with the blue shirt on. It's kind of my office, and I guess for the last nearly 20 years actually, I've worked in what we call in Australia rural extension or change in rural communities, particularly around agriculture, farming systems, and food systems. So I guess that's my office, if you like, which is usually with a whole heap of people, often farmers and government officers, people like that. And I guess one of my roles is to help facilitate change in various ways through various projects. I was trained in change formally, so I spent 6 years volunteering for Ananda Marga, which is a social spiritual organisation that I'm sure many of you are aware of, and then I worked in various agricultural roles before training in what's called agroecology at uni, and I majored in change. So I majored in what's called change, specialising in change, if you like. So I've kind of had some formal training in change, as well as I guess in PROUT and working in communities outside of agriculture. And the other person in the talk tonight. Sorry, Suman, you're going to have to turn your mic off. Thank you. I can't talk with background noise. It throws me out completely. Sorry, everyone. The other person in the team is Suveda, who's also on tonight from Bangkok, calling in from Bangkok. G'day, Sue, if she's not melted from the heat. So Sue's obviously we're husband and wife, and we've worked together on a number of projects, not just in agriculture. The other main project we've worked on in the last probably 8 years now, I think it is what's called Life Interwoven, which is a little social enterprise that we established with a few friends here in Australia to help artisans and education of kids in Southeast Asia. It was kind of like a project to try and help, one, protect artisan techniques and keep alive traditional handcrafts, and two, also raise funds for education projects. So it's kind of like a closed loop social enterprise kind of project, which is still ongoing, and we're always learning from it. So that's through there in action in Thailand a few years ago. Okay, so I guess what I thought I'd do tonight, and I'm hoping to get plenty of discussion with you guys, and I do apologise again for my COVID brain tonight, but there was 4 kind of areas, I guess, that I wanted to just open up to talk about and then open up for a bit of discussion. The first one is just really setting the scene and talking about PROUT, obviously progressive utilization theory, as a model of change, and getting your guys' opinion as to what you see are the elements of that model, because at the heart of PROUT, it is actually a model of change for society, I guess, in the big picture, and that starts at the small scale. And then the second thing is just to briefly touch on the communities that we work within, the people that we work with, wherever we are on the planet. We live and work in communities, we socialize in communities. So I guess when we're talking about change, we're talking about people. So I really just wanted to touch on that and get some ideas moving around that with everyone. And then I was going to touch on the really big kahuna, which is change, the what, the why, and the how. Now, change theory has about, since the Second World War, I guess you've got change theory as a professional discipline in the modern world, and we could go on and on and on about change theory, but I'm just going to just break it down into some pretty simple concepts as to the what, why, and how of change without getting too complicated about it all. And I think it's really important to note that although I have worked for organizations and companies in my career, we mainly work in community change processes, which can be slightly different than organizational change that you often hear about, and you get a lot of change practitioners that are into organizational change. When you're dealing with groups of people informally, in informal social settings, they're sometimes part of organizations. They're often in very informal networks as well. And the change process goes way beyond just formal organizational change. And I think that's an area of change that maybe isn't focused on enough in PROUT, in my opinion. The informal social dynamics around change and working in that space is really important. And finally, I just thought I'd pose a question to you as PROUTists. I'm assuming most of you are interested in PROUT that are listening to this. Either that or you've got nothing better to do on a Saturday night. Is what are you actually trying to do yourself as activism, in PROUT activism, and have you got really clear strategies and defined targets to what you're doing? And that's been a really big thing that I've learned in my career, is being really strategic in what you're doing, even in small projects, can make such a powerful difference. So I guess let's just start. Hopefully that makes sense to everyone, and hopefully it's something that'll be of interest to you. So let's jump straight in and just discuss PROUT as a model of change. And I'd like to get your input to this session here. Here's Sue with Ajam, one of the weavers and seamstresses that we work with in Thailand to help us develop sort of ethical products, I guess. And she's a bit of a leader with the Seamstress Network and helps train young seamstresses as well. So I guess, when we're doing projects, it's about, well, what are we trying to achieve here? We're trying to help achieve social change for people in a whole lot of ways, in different aspects, health, economics, you name it. But I guess what are the pillars that underpin PROUT as a social model, I guess, is my question to you guys. I, as I mentioned, work in agriculture and rural communities. Here's a project in Vanuatu that I've been lucky enough to work on in partnership with a South African community development economist. That's It's all about change and empowering economic empowerment of local communities, in this case, coconut growing communities. So I guess, you know, it's when we work, we often think, well, how and why is what we're doing proutist? So we might think we're taking a proutist-based approach, but are we really taking a proutist-based approach? And so I guess this is the questions that you ask yourself is, are the things you're doing and the approaches you're taking and the goals you're setting, are they actually proutistic? How proutistic are they, etc.? So I'd really like to just start tonight by asking you guys, what are the essential elements or the key elements of the PROUT model of change? So hopefully that kind of makes sense as a question. What are the key parts to PROUT if we think about it as a model for change? Does anyone want to throw any ideas out there for me at this point? I'm assuming plenty of you have read the fundamental principles and the different aspects of PROUT. Anyone want to throw in what the model, the elements are of the PROUT model when it comes to change?
I can say.
Sorry, yes, sorry, Davy, go for it, please.
Probably one important element is a local economy and using the local resources and employing people locally.
Yeah, great. No, look, I think it's a really important dimension to the PROUT model. And often when we read PROUT theory, it's all about that social change, the social cycle and the varnas and all this stuff. And it's like mega history and everyone's getting super hormonal because you can just see the whole world will change. But the reality is that it is very much a localized model. It's a model of local empowerment of local communities, particularly diversified local economies. Yes. So yeah, I think that's a really important aspect of PROUT that's not forgotten by a lot of us when we're activists on the ground, but you can forget that when you're thinking and reading PROUT at that big scale that obviously PR Sakar also sets really well. Anyone else want to add any other dimensions to the PROUT model apart from that localized dimension?
Can I
yeah, so what I might do, I'll just follow the hand. Thanks for putting your hand up, Prakash. We forgot to put that out there in the beginning, Maheshwar. So yeah, please put up your yellow hand, or if you don't have a yellow hand to put up, just hold your hand up really clearly because I've got two screens going. I'm going to start with Prakash in the US and then I'll jump over to the other ones that have got their hand up. Prakash, go for it.
Well, I think a key element in everything we do in PROUT is cooperation, but not just but cooperation, specifically coordinated cooperation, meaning it's not a top-down, it's not a subordinate kind of cooperation. And so whatever it is that we're doing, that needs to be an element. So we need to be always fostering how people can cooperate and learn from each other, and not establishing hierarchies and superiority or inferiority relations between the experts and the people who don't know anything. So I think that's probably a very important component.
Yeah, thanks, Prakash. Yeah, look, it's definitely something always on my mind, is that coordinated cooperation. And we're seeing in the world at the moment, you know, imposed change by either dictators or worse, or all kinds of people trying to impose change on others. And we've found in our work that it can be quite challenging to help empower people to work in a coordinated cooperative way, because a lot of our structures, social structures around the planet are actually not set up for that in some ways. One of the rules we have in our little business, where we do a lot of our work through our little company, if you like, is we don't usually use PowerPoint presentations like what I'm doing tonight. So when we do a lot of work with farmers, what we call capacity building, or you might call it training or learning approaches, we actually don't like using that PowerPoint kind of passive learning, because it really does set up that expert expert person versus the non-expert, and so just trying to change that dynamic through whichever way you can is really important. And I think this is a really important part of when we're getting change. It's got to be that really collaborative approach, which often takes longer time, but it's more embedded in my experience. But anyway, yeah, great, thank you. I'll keep going. Raz Satmakananda, I'm assuming you're an Acharya Dada, and then Acharya. Yep. Yeah.
This is Satmakananda, and this
Yes.
is a field where I have been always very fascinated by. It started when I was in Philippines and continued in Brazzaville, Congo, when I saw the very local needs and possibilities. And,
Yeah.
and regarding your question here, so the point would be that it has to be very community related and directly related to the present social and economic needs. So that's the people and get motivated when they can immediately relate what's the purpose and how we go from here.
Yep. Great. Thank you, Dada. That's a really powerful thing. And I guess the key thing, if it's not relevant, if something's not relevant for a group of people, then they won't be motivated because it's not addressing whatever key needs they have. So this real relevance of agency when you're doing something is so important. And I think to understand that relevance, you've really got to listen more than talk with the community that you're working with. So I guess this relevance is really at the heart of PROUT as well, which kind of links to that localized, decentralized approach of a lot of PROUT as well. That you can't be decentralized if you're not right on the ground, relevant to the local people, really relevant to their day-to-day needs. Then it can't be effective decentralized approach. Great, thanks, Dada, very much. Are there any other people that want to put up or want to throw in something about that model of change for PROUT, of PROUT, what the essential aspects are, I guess, of its model? If you can't put your video on, then just put up your hand, the yellow hand, which is at the bottom of your screen. There's that little hands up emoji. But I'm just looking around, Maheshwar, I can't see anyone else that's thrown anything in at the moment. No. All good. Righto. Great. No, thanks for that. So I guess, a couple of the really key things that have come up there is that really localized aspect and that cooperative approach or coordinated cooperative approach and that real relevance, that immediate relevance to people right here and now. And I guess those three dimensions they're not always sort of, when you read books about PROUT, particularly from P.R. Sarkar, they're kind of embedded in those books, but often when you read the big principles of PROUT, kind of it talks about the big picture more than the little picture, the day-to-day picture. But I guess PROUT has these two dimensions to it. It has the big picture long-term, but it has very much the small-scale short-term as well. And I guess that's the scale at which most of us work on a daily basis. I think for me, the other two key things about the PROUT model of change is being able to deal with diversity. So understanding that human communities are highly diverse in a whole lot of ways. And the other one is that they're dynamic, that human society and the planet and everything is dynamic, and it's constantly going through these changes, broad changes, not just socially, but environmentally, etc. So I guess these are kind of these elements that underpin the PROUT model of change to a great extent. And obviously, P.R. Sarkar outlined a kind of model of how society is and the parts to a society and how it goes through change. He kind of gave us that social cycle framework. But yeah, there's these other key elements that are really important when we're thinking about supporting change. Okay, so let's have a look now at when we're working in change-based projects that we're hoping are PROUT-based. I guess the key thing is we're working with people, bloody people. They're always causing us a pain. They're always complex and they're difficult to deal with. But the reality is that people are obviously at the heart of the planet, for better or for worse, at this point in human history, as we've entered the Anthropocene, as it's sometimes called, the age of humans. And so we deal with communities, and here's a sugarcane farming community that I'm lucky enough to work with in far north Queensland, Australia. That's a community of a couple of thousand farmers and government officers and other people that work in the sugarcane industry, and they're going through change. And I'm a small part of that role in that change, in helping to support that change. So we're dealing with people, and we're dealing with communities, and communities are made up with people. So I guess the question I have for you guys now at this point is people, without using any swear words or anything, who are the types of people you are dealing with at the moment, and how do you categorize them? So, how do we sort people into different categories? And some people go, oh, you shouldn't pigeonhole people, and that's all good. But all human society and human and all philosophical and socioeconomic theories categorize people using different criteria. And when you're working with a group of people, like here, a group of farmers in the Northern Territory of Australia that I did a 6-month project with, they're all different people from different backgrounds, different ethnicities, different religions, a whole lot of differences in them, different education levels, etc. So I guess what ways as a PROUT activist, how do you make sense of people? Like, how do you put them into different groups? Does anyone want to throw out the different ways that they kind of lump people so that helps them sort of deal with them? Who wants to have a crack? Maheshwara, do you want to have a crack?
I can, even though I'm not particularly good at analyzing and dealing with people generally, but I can recognize in projects, there are like the dreamers.
Yep, dreamers.
Like to dream, and there are people that are more down to earth, so planners.
Yep.
There are people that are leaders. They like to inspire others to to move forward. We can recognize maybe the intellectuals, those that like to think and think and think and think and think, and they have, I think it's what Martin Luther King said, it's analysis paralysis, because they think too much and they cannot move forward.
Yes, yeah, and it's a balancing act, isn't it? No, it's great. And I mean, when you're trying to get a project up and running, you've got to deal with all those people. So you're trying to harness the efforts of the different types of people. You need intellectuals, you need doers, you need planners, and the question is, how do you kind of get the best out of all of them together, keep them all happy, and make progress, because you do want to make progress. Razat Makananda, do you want to throw something in?
Yes, I have a direct experience when I was in Portugal.
Yes.
And there they had really organized into groups according to the characteristics what they have. And I was looking forward to already here, Maheshwara, he already mentioned you need to have the dreamers. Those were showing that big picture of how it should look like.
Yes.
And then also one was the planners, and then artists who goes around and expressing and showing in the form of music and art and whatever visual that comes into it. So I forgot now what was those 4 types of member they are categorizing, but the point is just here, it should be diverse. So-called hotspots, what was very quite fashionable a long time ago, but like-minded, it would never work. It is the diversity of opinions and being able to somehow get hold into one common. So that's the way to do it.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that. Yeah, the diversity, not identity, is the law of nature. I guess I'm sure there's a reason why that principle is smack bang in the middle between the economic principles and the social cycle theory principles. But yes, so it's this diversity of people, but categorizing them. And it's interesting for me, in the last couple of years, I've started to work on some projects with farmers where we've had artists as well, and getting artists and farmers to collaborate, which for me, I've never been involved with anything like that. Artists were always seen as being a bit weird in my field, but it's been really, really good, and it really changes the dynamic of projects in a really positive way when you bring artists in and they get everyone seeing things differently. You know, whether it's just a grassroots farmer, or it's a government officer, or it's myself, or you artists really add this dimension to thinking and getting people thinking as a group, which is really powerful. It's been a real eye-opener. So, yeah, I think having artistic people. So we've kind of been categorising in. Does anyone have another sort of way they categorise the people they work with? Anyone else want to throw in anything? No, all good. No one's putting their hands up.
Team players.
Oh, yep. Kalyani, yep. Team players, yep. So some people that are happy to work in a team, and other people, and individuals. Yep. Yep. Exactly. Yep. So, and I guess the question is, Kalyani, why is someone a team player and why is someone an individual, or like to do things individually? Because sometimes it's socially, it's just from their social experience that they're like that. Sometimes people enjoy being a team player, but because they've only ever had dysfunctional teams that they've worked in, they can be quite adverse to working in a team. But if you give them a functional environment for team work, then they can actually be really happy to work in a team. So it's really important to try and understand why people are like that, why people prefer to be in a team or to do things on their own, because sometimes it's not their personal preference necessarily. It may be just their lived experience has shaped them like that, if that makes sense.
Yes, and I think the leadership is very important to bring
Absolutely, sure. But I guess at this stage, yeah, and that's the job of a leader, is to understand the different types of people. One of the jobs of a leader. Great. Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah, please put, if you haven't got a video, then please try and use the yellow hand. That way I can see clearly who's saying anything, because it's hard for me a little bit. Okay, so yep, Suveda, you want to say anything about how you categorize people?
From my experience, sometimes we have a called troublemaker.
Oh yeah,
someone to resist to change. They that they sometimes who take longer time than others to change. Maybe they have to observe others people first, and they feel more comfortable and they'll change, but they won't change quickly. So before they change, they will cause a bit more trouble first.
Well, they cause you trouble, but you're causing them trouble by asking them to change quickly. They don't want to change quickly, so you're giving them trouble. So just because you want them to change fast, it doesn't mean you're in the right. So, but this is the key thing, isn't it? When we're either asking people to change, or think people need to change, or helping people change, you know, where we can impose our assumptions on them or on the change process that may not necessarily be valid. But yeah, you definitely get people that change faster than others and more conservative than others. And that, again, that's human society. And if we didn't have a conservative dimension to human society, then we'd be changing too much too often, and which sometimes is probably not a good thing. Okay, so all right, everyone. Well, I was just going to throw up all the different categories.
Didi also wants to...
Oh, yeah, Didi. Sorry. Yep, thank you, Didi. All good. Go for it, Didi. You've got to turn your mic on, Didi. Yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out two particular types, which one is one person who may or may not be very capable, may or may not be a leader, but tends to monopolize discussions or initiatives, tends to be always in your face. You have to find ways to let them express and to utilize, but to slow them down or quiet them down and let others participate. And then you have the very quiet people who sometimes have so much potential and so much to offer, but they don't come forward. And you have to find ways to help them to be comfortable. Sometimes they're uncomfortable in a group, or they're just very shy. Or I often find in groups, those two opposing dynamics can create a lot of disequilibrium.
Yeah, great point, Didi. Yeah, it's one of the skill sets, I guess, that sort of you have to develop when you're doing community stuff is facilitation, group facilitation, and in various ways. And there's a number of tricks you can use to draw out the quiet ones, who are often quite competent people, and to kind of control the really assertive and outgoing guys who, yeah, they obviously sometimes have a lot to contribute, but they can dominate. So there's a few different ways that I've been able to sort of successfully manage that dynamic, particularly when you're facilitating a group, to find out what everyone thinks and get sort of the issues out of a small community group. There are some really handy tricks you can use for doing that, which have worked really well for me, because that is a real problem. And you find that the people that are quiet and don't talk much naturally, but have a lot of knowledge and that you want to access and the group to access, there are kind of tips, facilitation tricks you can use for drawing that out, and vice versa for kind of keeping in check your really dynamic guys too. So there are ways to do it, and the biggest for me is to have a really well thought through facilitated structure so that you manage that dynamic. And again, it's coming down to being strategic in your thinking. And when I say strategic, I mean down to very specific activities that you're doing, right down to the 10 minutes sort of sessions within a half a day with a group of people, literally thinking right down to the very minute detail. Great, thank you, Didi. Yeah, so we've got all these dynamics of people, which basically makes them hard to deal with. So basically, the sooner we get to AI and robots, the better, basically, for the planet. But no, I'm just kidding, everyone. I've got a funny sense of humor that hardly anyone ever gets. But basically, if you think about it, we all use all these different types of categories when we're dealing with people. So I've put the first one there, which is the classic PROUT one, which is obviously the Varna, so the 4 Varnas of society, or of people in society, the Kshatriyans, Vaishyas, Shudras, etc., Viprans. But basically, just because you've got one kind of label that you might give people under PROUT theory, it doesn't mean that there's not other dimensions to humans. So just because someone is a intellectual doesn't mean they also don't have a whole lot of other stuff going on, and vice versa with the other Varnas. So we often use quite a lot of different categories, and they can be socioeconomic, like how much money someone has, the gender, the race, sexual orientation of people, politics, social outlook. Like, I've never been to America, and I'm kind of half want to go there and half don't want to go there. But basically, people, often in some countries really self-identify on their political persuasion, which can really obviously influence the social dynamics. In other countries, it's not as important, but social outlooks, conservatism and progressivism, they're natural parts of human society wherever you go. Personality type, which I think we talked about a little bit there, Maheshwar and Razat Makananda and Didi. And there's different ways there's different categories or schemes that have been brought up. Some of you might have heard of the Myers-Briggs framework, which is pretty much, in my opinion, a load of BS, but there are different ways to categorize humans. Learning style is another one. Some people, there's some theories that people learn hands-on, other people learn by reading, or this kind of thing. The risk profile, which is something that Suveda brought up there. Some people are much more adverse to risk. They don't want to change. They like stability. They don't like uncertainty, and so they are much maybe less open to changing quickly. So all of us have an inclination somewhere on the spectrum between being really risky taking or really adverse to risk, and we all sit somewhere on that spectrum for different things. Leadership, so some people show overt leadership, some people show hidden leadership. Some people don't want to be leaders at all. They don't see themselves as leaders. Some people are just happy to follow. And then we have You can categorize people on the moral, where they sit on different moral value frameworks too. There's quite a number of psychological kind of moral value type frameworks that are used these days. And finally, you could just categorize people by what type of job they have. And all of those different categories are actually useful in different contexts. And I guess the point I'm trying to get across, what we've found in our work is working with communities is diversity is always there when you're a group of people like this group here of people, landholders out on a field day. You've got people from all backgrounds, all ages, all personality types. You've got all kinds of people, and so you've got to work with people as a group as well as individuals. And there are times when you use the different categories to help you, and there's times when the categories are not useful and they're going to hinder you. And sometimes you'll make an assumption based on a category, like all old people are less likely to change their farming practice, and all young people are going to change more readily. Well, that assumption doesn't hold at all. You'll get very conservative young people that won't change their farming practices, and very open, very old farmers that change very quickly when they get a new idea. So you can't really assume anything. You've just got to assume that people are complex, which again, it makes it a bit challenging. But we're dealing with people, and that's who and so people, there's lots of different ways we can characterize them, if that makes sense. Okay, so now I've got a question for you. What do you think are the three most important things for a long life? And this is based on some really important research. Now, I'm talking about a developed country, so it was work done in Australia, but I think it was also done some work based on some European countries as well. But it's quite a very big study. So what would you think from that list, that group of things there, do you think are the top three things for a long life? So just have a look at it. You've got not smoking, flu vaccination, well, that's a bit of a topical one at the moment. Social support, low alcohol, not obese, that means fat or overweight. Sorry, I'm not supposed to use that word, obese, fat, not overweight, social integration, physically active, unpolluted air, medication. I haven't put meditation in there. It wasn't in the study. Sorry, everyone. But meditation is a type of medication, for those of you that don't do it. Exercise and quitting smoking. Okay, so what do you reckon were the top three? Anyone want to have a stab, even just at the top one, what they reckon the most important thing is?
Social integration.
Social integration. Thank you, Kalyani. Anyone else? What do you got? Diddy? Sorry, Diddy? You have to put your mic on, Diddy. I haven't developed occult powers yet, mate.
Sorry, thank you for reminding me again. Yeah, I would say the first was social support.
Social support, great, thank you. Sarah Davey, what do you reckon?
Yes, I would go also for social integration, which would include support, I guess.
Yep.
And something to do with physical activity.
Yeah.
And I think obesity is also a problem today.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Sarah Davey. Prakash in the US?
Yeah, I agree. Social support, social integration as being the first two. I'm not sure the difference between those two. And physically active exercise is really a subset of that. But,
terrific. Thank you. Anyone else want to throw in anything that hasn't spoken yet? No, all good. Sorry, Govinda.
Not smoking and low alcohol.
No alcohol. Okay. Thanks, Govinda. I don't know if you're in France. It says FR there. It's pretty. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Is Govinda in France? It's a bit scratchy line, but it says FR, so I'm assuming he is. Yeah, anyone else? Yep. Anyone else got anything else they want to add? I thought because you're French, Govinda, I thought red wine would have been okay to live a long time. But anyway, don't the French reckon you've got to drink red wine to live to 100 or something like that? All right, let's find out what the research, which was a pretty important study done by the university. No, I'm kidding, Govinda. I'm just stirring you up. Okay, so let's see what the research showed. And I've put the study up here. It's from a really, really interesting social health study that was done by the University of Queensland researchers. They're actually international researchers, and basically, yeah, you can see the green kind of squares going from left to right is the ranking. So first was social support, second was social integration, and third is actually not smoking and quitting smoking. They were actually from the studies of people when they retired. So this was a really large study done on people at the point of retirement till the point of death. So how many years after retirement till they died. And the two things that helped you live as long as possible were being a member of different social groups and having social support in those groups. So not just being a member, but being a motivated member in a group. So I'm a member of this. So if you're in a group and you're motivated, socially motivated to be in that group, then by far and away, they were the two most important things. Even though most people, when you ask them, they think that smoking is the most important thing. It's important, but it wasn't the top two. And in fact, physically active, which people thought was the second most important thing, comes down at number 8. So yeah, you can sort of see that I guess the reason that I found this study really important for me was, one, because we often assume things based on our own biases and our own understanding of the world and society and things, and we listen to the media and all the rest of it, and so we can kind of come up with these theories about what it is. So the first thing is always trying to validate that your theories on why something is the way it is. But the second thing is just how important humans, the social dimension to humans and our lives are. They're so important to us. And in fact, when we understand change, or when we're trying to work with change with people, the social dimension is king and queen. It is everything. The social dimension to change is everything. It's at the center of things. And if you don't put it at the center of things, in our experience, you don't get that change. You don't get support. You don't get success in projects, basically. So I guess in a nutshell, and if anyone's interested in that book, this is from a book that study, The Psychology of Health, I think it's called. The Psychology of Social Health. Anyway, I can get you the copy of the title of that book. People are believing beings. I guess humans are believing beings. And if you think about the model of PROUT, humans have ideologies. Really, that underpins us as living beings. We have an ideology, we have idea, and we have ideology. So that's really underpins who we are. So we're believing beings. We have values, we have beliefs, and we have attitudes, all based on those values and beliefs. And those values and beliefs are our basic convictions about who we are, how the world works, and our purpose. And so when you're working with other people, they may not necessarily have all of their values align with yours, for example. That doesn't necessarily mean you can't work with them, but yeah, this is at the heart of humans, where we have belief systems and values. And the other thing, I guess, like this grazier here in the Northern Territory, is that we're thinking beings. We use instinct, so there's plenty of our decisions we make on instinct, but there's a lot of decisions we make on emotion. And then, of course, hopefully we make some of our decisions on reasoning. And in fact, the recent research into emotion and instinct and reasoning is showing how clearly, how interactive they all are, how they're all actually kind of embedded in each other, and that emotional and rational thought are actually two sides of the same coin in many ways, which is a whole fascinating area in itself. But I guess sometimes you'll say to yourself, oh, why doesn't that person do that? It's so obvious. So to pick on you guys in America, just because it's a big topic probably around the world in the media, most people, except for you guys in the US, would say, why don't you put some kind of regulation around gun control, because you'll probably lower the incidence of, gun incidences. And for me outside the US, it's quite evident, but for a lot of Americans, it's not evident at all. That might be the same for a different topic for me as an Australian. I might think one thing, and people looking in from the outside will think, oh, yep, well, you guys, you definitely don't know what you're doing. So we all have different kind of cognitive perspectives, or sometimes known as cognitive biases. We all have our different ways of seeing the world, and we apply reason, but we apply it through emotional lens, and we also have our instinct kicking in as well. And this is really important because often when you're trying to, or you're thinking you want to influence someone or ask them or talk to them in a rational way to convince them on an argument or something, it's not necessarily the way to help someone perceive a new view is to use rational thinking. You can rationalize something all you like, but if they have very strong beliefs and emotional processes to the contrary, it may be making things less acceptable to them, not more. So we've all got these inherent biases in different ways, hopefully everyone can see that. Any comments or thoughts from anyone? Maheshwar?
Prakash wants to say something.
Sorry, I missed that. Prakash, you want to jump in there? Hopefully I didn't get any in the US too upset.
No, I think looking at your chart you just had about the factors for long life, is that the ones that were the highest, the most protected, had the perception being the lowest. It was actually the social support was the prime first factor, and yet it was perceived as the lowest factor.
Yes.
And then the social integration was the next, was like the third from the third lowest.
Yes, that's right.
Like, wow, that's huge. And then even the ones that some of us like physically active, those were ones that are probably being promoted a lot. There's a lot of industries that promote the importance of exercise, physically active, not obese, all the industries around those. And so there's a high perceived rank, but in reality, they're much lower. There's not big industry saying there should be social integration and social support. But was there any clarity about, two questions. Was there a clarity about what's the difference between social support and social integration? And then the last comment I had was that according to P.R. Sarkar about PROUT, he said that to think rationally was important to overcome complexes, particular superiority and inferiority. If we're really being guided by those sentiments of superiority and inferiority, then it's very, very difficult to think rationally.
Yeah, great. And again, thank you very much for all of those comments. Look, without pulling up the paper and the book, which I'll definitely get a copy of and show it on the screen before the end of tonight. But I think just thinking back to the study, the social integration was how many different social groups you're a part of that you're positively motivated, and the social support was basically friendship and kinship networks, like people that you still communicate with on a regular basis, that are either you'd consider friends or kin, if that kind of makes sense. So I think I'll have to triple check it, but I'm pretty sure that was the difference between the two. I think the one of these key things that you've highlighted there is, and it's not just in the area of health, and it's not just the area in gun control, it's in every area of our life. Humans have what we call cognitive bias, and we have these, we create a perception of the world that we want, that suits us at any one time, and it doesn't always align with actually what's happening in many aspects of our life, and in fact in the modern world, in the modern society, it can be quite disruptive to society. Like, you're putting all this effort into health. We know that mental health is a lot of its loneliness, and yet we're putting all this effort into going to the gym more and eating protein shakes or whatever people feel they need to do, whereas actually, like really developing more grassroots-based community support networks that help people feel connected is probably going to cover off on 80% of their health stuff. So I guess, and this idea in PROUT of rational thinking, and there's actually a whole field of psychology now about decision making and helping use rationality when you're going through decision making. That's applied, by boards and companies and organizations. It's a whole field of effective decision making that I think is really important for PROUT. At a local, when you're doing local work with a local group of people, like Didi's pointed out, you've got people that want to railroad or take over, and your job as a facilitator is to develop the skills of the group so they can make their own, make good collective decisions that have got good aspects of rationality built into them. Always knowing that we're never going to get rid of emotion because it's part of who we are as a human. And in fact, without emotion, your decisions can be dangerous. So it's just what type of emotion or what type of sentiment is driving the emotion that's influencing your decisions. So yeah, really, it's why I really like that book on that social health stuff, because it really opened my eyes to the fact that when I'm working with a group of farmers, for example, and myself, I can't just assume that we're all just acting as rational actors. In fact, I know we're not. So it then really influences how I'm working with people. But yeah, you can sort of see how challenging that would be to the health industry in general, and the government that's swaying a lot of tax money on all kinds of things. Okay, so I'll keep going, but please pull me up if anyone puts up their hand. So this great, I'm learning heaps as we're going. So we use, sorry everyone, I guess we use these values, our rational mind, our emotions, our values, our beliefs. All of these things influence our perception of the world around us. Like this group of farmers here, who are looking to change the way they farm, basically, to a more ecologically based way of farming from an industrial approach, which has been the norm for them for 50 years and for all of us for 50 years in where I come from. And so we all use them to make sense of the world around us. So this is how we make sense of our world, through all of these thinking and value things. And the way we act and the way we behave are the result of that. So the way our beliefs, our thinking, and what needs we have causes us to act and behave. Now, sometimes we say one thing and do another thing. That's quite common for humans. But basically, we'll do what really aligns to our thinking and beliefs as a general rule. And when we're forced or asked or forced to do something that doesn't align to our beliefs and thinking, that's when we have internal problems, or that's when a social group will stand up for themselves, or try and undermine the status quo, because it's going against that intrinsic belief system that they have. And that's why when people are forced to do terrible things that they don't want to do, it's so internally difficult for them psychologically, and can lead to, very severe issues for them for the rest of their life. So basically, there's this alignment, if you like, and I guess that's the key thing. One of the underpinning things of PROUT as a model is that humans have an ideology. We have an idea. We want to be happy. We are spiritual beings, if you like. We have that dimension to us that's looking for the greater. And if we have a socioeconomic system that goes against that, then that can be quite problematic for us as people, which is thinking. Prakash, yes, you do want to throw something in?
In the chat, because you were talking about, working with groups, and there's all the dynamics, and you were talking about having rational discussions, and yet people have cognitive biases, or they have certain beliefs and ways of thinking that could actually get in the way of, and how do you kind of like model behavior that's more compassionate, cooperative, collaborative, that can kind of like discourage this, kind of like diminish the feelings of superiority and inferiority, by helping people be aware of them and realizing the harmful aspects of those, and then the positive aspects of becoming more understanding and accepting. That seems like because we're trying to shake, because PROUT does have a worldview is sort of grounded in a compassionate understanding, even though there's certainly critical analysis. There's that on an emotional level. It's a compassionate approach, and so, but one with this approach that's maybe not compassionate, if not examined, can really interfere in the functioning of any kind of a group or community.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess the practical side to all of that is, one, obviously, when you're in a leadership role in a community, is setting that behavioural norm. But it's more than that. So you also have to create social and physical structures that reinforce those social norms, and that's a key type of strategy that we apply. So I'll come to them a bit later in the session, where I talk about the three main strategies to support change, based on what I call modern theory of social psychology, and basically one of them is to create behavioural norms like that you'd like to see, or that everyone would like to see in the community. But two is to actually create structures that reinforce those things. And those structures can be social, like Facebook pages. They don't have to be physical, but they can definitely be physical as well. So for example, when you want to talk about these aspects, you have to go to a meeting room. You know, it's done in a formal location or through a formal process. So we apply a mixture of strategies, which I will cover, which to try and reinforce these behavioural values and norms that you're trying to put, that are different, that you're trying to work toward as a group. I will come back to some examples. Sorry, everyone, I've missed the chat. So I've got the chat open now. So Dipani and Anti, sorry. I know. Thank you for that. Thank you for those comments. Yeah, great. So Dipani's idea about leadership. Yeah, exactly. Correct. About you've always got different people in there and moving together. Number two, socioeconomic. So Malcolm, I was just putting it in there, sort of pretty much someone's earning power, I guess, or their way, where they're at in terms of socioeconomic status in the society. Are they rich? Are they middle class? Are they working class? Are they some other class that you might want to categorize them? I guess if you're in India, for example, you might have different caste systems that people get lumped into. Different parts of the world, different castes exist. No worries, Killan's going to go. Yeah, great. And I've got that one there. Thank you. Yeah, Razat Makananda. Yes.
Yes, I have something what has been very helpful for me since the last 30 years. Because when you're working in different countries, you already mentioned here that like in India, they have different behaviors than other countries. Something what really helped me when I found a book written by Dean Foster, The Global Etiquette Guide. If it's a guide to Africa in Europe or in Asia. And that is not speaking about what you eat and what you dress, but there are 9 inclinations, orientation. Are you a future or past oriented? Are you formal or informal oriented?
Yep.
Those helped a lot. First, it gives a background of the characteristic. Doesn't mean that everybody will be the same, but there are some similarity in that particular country. And if you have an awareness about those, it helps a lot of getting started, that you not immediately stumble on the nose or something what was not proper because you was familiar with the so-called prana dharma of that country.
Razat Makananda, can you put that title of that book in the chat so that Maheshwar and me can grab it? I have heard of that book. I haven't got a copy of it. I buy lots of books in this field. That would be fantastic. And there is a few other sort of social psychologists that have a similar frameworks, you know, for cross-cultural working and stuff. And there's a lot of work in this space around, you know, behavioral and social psychology, and you know, trying to look at the common elements across different cultures and areas of the world where people look very different on the surface. And yeah, there are different, obviously, norms and behaviors, but underpinning what are the common elements. So that'd be terrific. Thanks very much for that. Maheshwar, I have no idea about time and we'll probably run out of it. So you just give me 20 minutes when you need me to be quiet, because I'm nowhere near where I thought I'd be. So I guess in a nutshell here, if I kind of pull together these communities that we're working with, we're dealing with people, and of course we all just want to get to the point where there's AI and chatbots and no people left, so the planet's really simple to manage. But at the moment we've got to deal with 10 billion people, and obviously the reality is that our beliefs and our thinking are influenced by three main things really in general, and that is the interplay of genes, the environment, and society. So firstly, we're influenced by our genetic makeup, and there's no doubt that our genetic makeup, as we're learning more and more, and the epigenetic influence as well, influences our behavior. It influences our physiological systems. So that's obviously one thing. The second thing is we're influenced by our environment. So if you live in a mega city like Tokyo, for example, it's very different than if you live in a little rural place with hardly any people. And a friend of mine who just went to a funeral for a farmer that we both know, she made the comment, she was born in a large city but now lives in quite small rural community, and she was quite uneasy. One of the big differences in her life moving to a rural community as she got older was the way that grief is expressed. So in the city, generally people can just grieve and they're a bit anonymous. After the funeral, you can be a bit anonymous in your grief. But in a small rural community, the grief is quite public, and you can't really, you have to do it in a quite open way because, you know, you're in each other's pockets a lot more. And that's very different from her. It was one of the big things she's noticed in her life is the expression of grief is very different for her when she lives in a tiny community where everyone knows everyone. So obviously we get influenced by that. But the other key thing that we're influenced by is the groups that we belong to. And if there's one really big lesson, I guess, that I've learned during community development over 20 years plus or whatever, is that the social dimension to humans is so important, and it can influence how we behave. We've got the way that people behave in a mob or in a protest when there's thousands of people protesting, and they might do something they don't normally do. When they're on their own, they could be quite different. But we get very much influenced by our group. And so being aware of that these three things is so important when we're dealing with people and trying to understand why they're doing what they're doing. That's really important. If you want to work with people, it's about not just, oh, they do this or they do that. Yeah, but why? Why are they doing that? And what's the driver of that? Okay, so I'm already losing a few people, which is not surprising. Hopefully everyone's going all right, because I'm still here with this COVID bug lurking around, but I'm still going to tick on. Hopefully I've given you a bit of food for thought. So I'm kind of, I think, about halfway there. There you go. Thank you, Dada. He's put in that book. Well done. Thanks for that.
Yeah, there are
so now
for different continents. I studied in the Europe, but just
no worries.
There is Asia, there is Africa, there is States, and all of that. That's
terrific. Yeah. I won't get myself into too much trouble as I normally do if I read that, probably. Thanks, Dada. So, so now what I just wanted to talk a little bit is about change. Here's 3 sugarcane farmers that are going through change. And change is a massive topic, basically. There people write hundreds of thousands of books on it. I'm just going to keep it simple. When we're working practically with communities, you can't get too complex about things. You just got to keep it simple for yourself when you're doing community projects. So the question is, why do people do what they do, and instead of doing them what we might want them to do? So here is a group of farmers in North Queensland in Australia protesting against environmental legislation that's basically constraining their behaviour or trying to regulate them. And having worked closely with those communities, I understand both sides of the argument very well. But basically, they're getting a change imposed on them from the government. The government saying you have to change for whatever reason, and whether it's a valid reason or not, well, that's again coming back to that rationality and what Prakash from the US talked about too. Like, people perceive that they might be damaging the Great Barrier Reef in this case, but the science may be saying that they're not the main problem, even though the perception is that they are. So you've got all of these things going on. But, when you're a PROUTist, you kind of often are assuming that the model that you're proposing is better. Oh, yeah, I think we should cooperate, or I think we should start this or do this because I think it's going to be a good idea. But the community you're working with, is it really what they want? Is it really what they need? Is it really relevant to them? And why is your model better than another model? So I guess the key thing is that when people are changing, it's in complexity. So I just want you to think about for a moment where you live, so wherever you are on the planet and whichever community you live in. So it doesn't matter whether you're doing sort of community development work or not, but just where you live, your own community. What are all the social, just make a quick list on a bit of paper, the social, economic, technical or environmental changes that are happening to the people in the community where you are right at this moment. Just spend 2 or 3 minutes making a list of all the social, economic, technical, environmental changes that are happening to yourself and to the people you live with just right at this moment. So this is a flood that's happening now in India and Bangladesh, and you can see this farmer here is going through big change, environmental change, a very short-term flood, but it could be part of a longer-term climate-induced changes to flood patterns in where he lives, and that's going to have ramifications for his social life, for economics, a whole lot of things. So yeah, what are the changes? How many? See who can get the most things. So what are all the changes that you're going through and the communities that you live with are going through at the moment? There's probably very few people that live further away from Russia and Ukraine and Europe than where we live here in southern Australia, but we're still feeling the impact of that war that's going on there. So, the economic impact is affecting us here in Australia with the price of energy and fuel. Obviously, even the emotional impact that it's having on people. There's changes all around the world at the big scale, but also locally. So what's happening locally? Like who's got more than 10 things so far? Anyone got more than 10 things? Maheshwar, what do you got?
I have 4 things.
Only 4? I thought you were writing, watching soccer or something. What's going on?
I basically live in my own cave, actually, so I don't know what's going on outside of my house.
Yeah, righto. Well, you got to get out a bit more. So, what are the 4 things on your list?
So, one of the things is fires that happen in Portugal and in this area every year, and they devastate the forests, and which result in less and less rainwater.
So a change in the environment, a large change in the environment that's happening. Yeah.
So
what else you
I
got?
live close by to a master unit, and I think everyone here knows what a master unit is. So that's being quite impactful to the community.
Okay, so you've got
we are doing.
righto. So you've got some guys have set up something called a master unit, and that's impacting the rest of the town around you. Yep. What else is going on?
Technology. So I live in a rural area, and in Portugal, like most of the world, rural areas are populated mostly by old people. And as technology develops, and as young people are moving out of these rural areas, older people find themselves in more and more isolation because first of all they don't have most people leave the area, and then as technology develops they don't feel like they have a full grasp on how the world works anymore. I noticed that very much with my parents, because now my father is 70 years old, and now he struggles a lot to understand how the world works now with the internet, and even to do simple things he doesn't know how to do them. And I feel it's the same with many people around here. And then another one that I pointed out was inflation. Portugal is actually quite lucky in the sense that inflation, especially in food costs, is not that high is not as high as other parts of the world. Like, for example, recently I heard one data saying that in Denmark, the food costs have recently gone up 70%, 70.
Yep.
And here you don't notice it that much. But of course, fuel prices are really high. And they're, I think, doubled in the last 2 years, probably. So yeah, those were the ones I pointed out.
Yep. And all of those changes you've described are very large scale, and they're going to have an impact on society in the long term. Yep. Great, thank you. Anyone else got any other types of changes that they're experiencing apart from inflation, environmental changes driven by environmental and climate change, that demographic change and or technological changes? Yep. Sarah Devi,
Yeah, I would like to say something. So what I observed, I live in UK, in London. I observed that as the crisis, both economic and the war in Ukraine, as it developed, there is less and less concern about the projects that used to be very popular even a few years ago, like a project for very simple, like to increase the population of bees, for example, or things like that, or giving school kids packets of to grow their own food in school. So all that, as the funds are cut in other areas of education, all that is scrapped. And I think it's going to be, even more on that line. It's going to be really a problem when I compare with 20 years ago. There were so many initiatives and so many support given to people who were not in any vulnerable group, but just the members of the community. That's all gone. And in terms of technical change, I think it's also was related to the COVID and lockdowns, that polarization that is so easy to exaggerate online between different groups or people of different opinions. It's just, I think it's a big change that happened.
Great. Yeah, and see that observation you have of the social civil society, the change in focus from those small kind of, you might say, less important, they're just as important, those key things around, like more bees and kids little education type projects, or even just social projects with kids growing their own food and all of that. And that shift that's happening as the really big scary changes that affect us all are starting to override or swamp some of those other dimensions to our life. And so you when we look at change, you can look at large imposed changes that are negative, and if they're imposed and you have no control over it, they're very scary. They're really threatening to us as a group, as a people. And so we tend to just drop everything else, unfortunately, because it's the other things that give you resilience in life. So yeah, it's really important. But hopefully you can sort of see the step I've asked you to do, because when I work with a group of farmers, there can be 40 different things going on. And unless you're aware of them all, it's really hard to connect with people. So if you're aware, to really get, this is why I've sort of asked this question, or asked you guys to do this, because when you clarify it all, it helps you to make sense of this quite uncertain times. And then you can kind of go, all right, well, what do I need to do as in my own small way, as a leader, as a PROUT change agent, what steps do I need to take? Unless you can map the broad change processes going on, it's very hard to know where to step and what to do. Thank you, Sarah Devi, for that. That was really good. And I've got Prakash from the US as inequality. Yep, another big one, social inequality and white supremacy. So again, that polarization. Yep. many different dimensions, war, gun violence, severe drought, fires. Yep, sounds like the same sort of end of days problem here. Should pull the Bible out. What's that chapter in the Bible? Revelations or something. That'll make us feel better. Anyone else want to say anything else? Any other changes that are going on? That they might be more local, like Sarah Davies made that notice just in the civil society around her at the local scale, or they could be the whole of your country, or it could be the whole planet. But I think a lot of these changes are very common, like inflation is a really big driver that's going on around the world at the moment. Obviously, it's something we're all feeling wherever we are. Okay, great. I'll keep rolling, everyone, because I'm way over time and Maheshwar will pull me up before we finish. But basically, I just want to leave you with a guy called Bridges, who was a change theorist from the 1980s, I think. He's like one of these change gurus from the 1980s. And I really like his model, because basically change is leaving somewhere. It's transitioning. And here's some farmers that are changing their farming system over, and they're sharing stories or pictures of their crops that they're changing. Transitioning from somewhere you've left, and then you go through a transition and you end up somewhere new. Here's a farmer that's transitioned his farming system over to a more ecological approach, and he's kind of half happy, sort of. But I guess the key thing is that the reason I like Bridges' model of leaving somewhere, going somewhere, and this transition in between is that it helps you, it keeps it simple, because change, people can make change really complex, but basically you've got to be really clear why you're leaving something, why people are leaving, why they want to leave something, why we all should leave behind where we are now, because sometimes people like to be where they're at. If it's safe and secure, it's what they know. But basically, at the moment, we're all feeling insecure and we've got a lot of change going on. We want to be somewhere else. We can't go back to the past, but we want to go somewhere better. And so the challenge with change is to help people leave that past, help them leave it. And sometimes there's grieving involved with that. Help them deal with the uncertainty of getting somewhere new, and always inspire them to where they're headed. And the big challenge is transitioning, because when you're going through change, you've never been where you're going. It's new. So you actually have never been there. And that's why change is so uncertain. It can cause such uncertainty and angst for people, because you've never been there. So if I tell you, oh, PROUT's unbelievable, mate, PROUT's just the best thing since sliced bread, and when we're all in PROUT land, we'll just be happy as Larry. Well, no one's ever been in PROUT land on the planet Earth, so sorry to tell you, we don't know what it looks like yet. Everyone comes up with this and that, but we've never been there. So the reality is no one can tell you what it's going to be like. We kind of got a feeling for it, and we've got some goals, and we've all got this, our own vision that we're trying to collaborate on. But it's all uncertain, and now we've got to try and get there. And so it's during the transition where there's a lot of uncertainty. Okay, we don't like our current socioeconomic systems, or we don't like that law, or I don't like the way farming's done, or I don't like the fact that kids don't eat lunch at school, whatever it is we're trying to change. All right, we know what we don't want. What will it look like? Well, we've never been there, so we don't know, but we've got to try and aim for something. And in the meantime, we've got to kind of experiment and trial. And that's transitioning is all about making mistakes. So the problem with change is people don't want to make mistakes. But it's really important to support that process, and that's really at the heart of it. So I know there's lots of other models of change and all kinds of complex models of change, but basically you're leaving somewhere, you're transitioning, and you're trying to end up somewhere. And that's just from a guy called Bridges. The last few things to talk about, thanks for that positive change there. Prakash from America, he's put a good one in there, cooperative. So we're seeing the growth of cooperation. That's good. Yeah, we shouldn't focus all on the bad. So change happens at different scales. I'm sure you've all seen this most famous building in Australia. This was during COVID, when that's why there's no people there. But obviously COVID was a big change to our society. I'm sure yours as well. There's different sizes of change. So there's different terms you'll see, but there's first and second order, major or minor, evolution or revolution. Sometimes in PROUT we talk about a revolution, but there's also evolutionary change, and that's definitely embedded in the PROUT model as well. Large or small change, like look at the Ukraine. The people of the Ukraine are going through a really large change, not just small change. You know, this is a historical change for Europe, and for the world, but particularly I think for Europe for the next couple of 100 years. This current war that's going on, but it's a massive change for Ukraine as a nation, for Russia as a nation, and for Europe in a broader sense is going through change as well. It's not a small change; it's a big jump quickly. Change happens at different frequencies. This is just a nice picture of a really nice beach in southern Australia, but it's a beautiful place to go. It's called Disaster Bay if you want to look it up on Google. We went there for a holiday and had a day on the beach, me and Sue. But basically, a few days after we left there, Maheshwara had a really severe fire. I don't know if you remember the bushfires in Australia about 2 years ago, where this was one of the areas, and we were lucky to get home. And unfortunately, this is really pristine wilderness, and some of the national park got, you know, a 1 in 200 year fire, which is so. And then they had COVID, and so the tourism got whacked. So that little community had lots of different big changes all at the same time, you know. And then so it went through quite a few things. Nothing like a war, but it had big changes that were really impactful for the community there. Change. The other thing about change is that it can be chosen or imposed. Like the people of the Ukraine didn't choose to have this big change. It was forced upon them, if you like. But this is a cooperative of farmers that's setting up a cooperative, and they've chosen to change the way they do things. So when people have agency and are choosing their change, then they're empowered, and that makes all the difference, obviously. But you're often working with communities that don't have any power, they don't have any agency. And you need to acknowledge that, and you need to have strategies to help manage that. It's really important. And so, yeah, because people have varying levels of control over the change, and this is from the project that Sue really leads, the Life Interwoven, a couple of young ladies that are technically really able to set up looms for the seamstresses or the weavers in this northern part of Thailand. And these two young ladies go around and they set up the loom for the other ladies, and it's a really high skill set. And unfortunately, most of the young people are gone to Bangkok because there's not much work around there. And so, you know, it's trying to create a project that people have a level of control over what they do and stay in their own community. But it comes down to economic empowerment, and you're also transferring this really important skill to some young people, because mostly it's old people with these skills now. So all of those things are coming in there, and they've got some agency over what's going on. And change means risk and uncertainty, like in the Pacific, where sea level rises, meaning that a lot of the island nations are feeling quite a lot of uncertainty because of sea level rise and climate change, and hence the rise of all kinds of things going on. So in a nutshell, change can lead to anxiety. And I guess if there's one big thing that another big thing that a leader can do is to help people with a positive vision, help people to develop their own, you know, a positive collective vision. But you've got to acknowledge that, you know, big change is an anxious time for everyone. But as a, you know, in a collaborative way, you can get through it. It's not always easy though. And I think it's really important to remember when you're working with a group of people that change is an individual process, but it's also a social process. So yes, you might have an individual, like Sue said before, someone who doesn't want to change, but actually people change as a group. Yes, individuals are part of it, and people individually change, and you have leaders and you have people that are not leading and following, but actually it is mainly a social process. And so if you think of it from that perspective, then it helps you when you're facilitating change quite quite remarkably. We've found with farmer groups, it's really improved the success of projects hundredfold by working with social dynamics. Yeah, so hopefully that's all making sense to everyone. I'm just going to check the time. So I think I'm just going to skip over a few of these slides now because I want to get towards the end. So just bear with me, everyone. Sorry, everyone. I'll just start here and finish up. So I guess the key thing is one aspect to think about is that when you give people time, control over their destiny and self-esteem, then there's three really important drivers of human nature. And this is this coconut project I mentioned in Vanuatu, where the sort of project leader, Andreas, when he kind of realized that and he built that into his project after many years of trying to empower these farmer networks, when he built in these ideas of giving them more time and control over their own destiny, it really changed the game. It's been quite phenomenal. I won't go into the details of it now, I haven't got time, but after many decades of social development work, it kind of cracked the code. It was a real eye-opener. But basically, I'll get to the end because I just wanted to sort of summarize things. People change slowly or quickly. We're social beings. I can't reinforce that enough. So I just want to sort of pull it together now. Sorry I was a bit scattered tonight, everyone, but yeah, it was a bit hard getting ready just because of the rough week I've had. So I just want to pull it together. If you're supporting a change process in a project that you're working on, I guess what I'd like to just summarize up is what I call the three broad approaches. And they're kind of just different types of strategies you can apply. And here's a group of sugarcane farmers, and this guy's a behavioral psychologist that's trying to convince them to change through all kinds of different tricks. But basically using modern psychology and modern sociology theory and blending that a little bit with your understanding of PROUT and those key elements of PROUT, the PROUT model of change that we highlighted: diversity, localized approach, relevance, and a coordinated cooperative approach. Using those elements, there's kind of three broad approaches that you can kind of think about. The first one's what they call behavioral psychology or behavioral insights. So here's an example for you from a motel or a hotel. I don't know what you call them in your country. It's where you stay when you're traveling for work, and you've got to stay in these places that have beds and TV and kind of, they're really boring. Anyway, this is what they put in the bathroom to get me to reuse my towel. It says, "Dear guest, you can help us help the environment. Simply hang your towels on the towel rail if you choose to allow them to dry for reuse." It's a bit of a mouthful. "Alternatively, place your toweling in the shower or on the floor for daily laundering." And then in brackets they said that's normal service. Well, if I'm a normal person and I like to be normal because I don't like to be too weird, I like to be part of the gang, I'm going to follow the normal service. I'm not going to do something different. And so even though they're asking me to think green, they're telling me by reusing, they're actually telling me it's normal to chuck it on the floor in the shower and get a new one. So can everyone sort of see there's a bit of a mixed message going on there? And if you're trying to get someone to sort of cooperate with you, and the way you can do that is what they call behavioral insights or behavioral psychology. So the way you word things or the way you present information is a really big part of that. And marketing, food marketing, people have been doing this to us for decades. But here's another way in another hotel. The majority of our guests reuse their towels at least once during their stay. So see how what they're trying to do is tell me that most people reuse their towels. So I want to be like most people because I want to be part of the group. So I'm going to reuse my towel. So just see how they've reworded that in a different way. And they haven't told me I have an option. They haven't told me my option, which is the alternative is to just chuck it on the ground and get a new one. They haven't even told me that option. So feel free to hang your towel for reuse. They haven't even then said, oh, but if you do want to get a new one, then chuck it on. Does everyone sort of see how they've structured that? So this is all a whole thing called behavioral psychology. I'm sure some of you have heard about it. It's the way they got us to wear a mask during COVID, and the way they get you to buy chocolates, or if don't eat chocolate, or red wine. Sorry, I know some French don't drink red wine. It's the way they get you to go to the gym instead of just joining social groups, all that sort of stuff. Here I am trying to work out what I can put in this recycling container in another place I stayed at. Yeah, it says on there I can put fruit and vegetable juice containers in, but as long as they're less than 1 litre, soft drinks as long as they're less than 3 litres. You can see how complex that label's getting, and you can imagine that all I'm going to do is just chuck everything in the bin because I can't be bothered reading it. But behavioural approaches basically influence a person's immediate choices and short-term actions, and it's done by applying what they call behavioural insights. So you can shift people's behaviour in the short term, and you can get them to make a different decision on something, on a simple behaviour. And that's a really important point, because behavioural insights don't often work, in my experience, on complex change or big picture paradigm change. They don't apply, and there's no point, but they can support the process. So you can use them in all kinds of ways, and there's all kinds of subtle ways, and I'm not going to go into it more, but here's another example of a different bin in an airport, and you can see how easy it is for me to make my simple behavioral choice much easier. So you can sort of see how it's applied in everyday life, everywhere you go, really. But it's an important field of human psychology that's worth thinking, worth understanding, and making an effort if you're doing PROUT-based projects, because the reality is that even though you might think, oh, we're not trying to influence people's behavior and that's all Big Brother 1984 sort of social engineering, the reality is that if you're asking someone to change or to go with you on a journey to a better society, then at the end of the day, there'll be norms and behaviors that people will have to change. They might not be the ones that you think they have to change. The group might decide on them, but this is the whole nature of human society and how humans change. The second group of strategies or approaches is what that's called systemic, and I mentioned this one before. So this is where you build structures within which people can support each other, and this is so important. So if I've got someone excited or inspired to help me on a project, or to help each other and set up a cooperative or some collaborative type project, you have to build structures that support and reinforce that collaboration. And this is a group of cane farmers, sugarcane farmers, part of what we call the Regen Cane Network, which was a social structure. It has a Facebook page, it has this and that, but at heart, it's a social structure. And it was really well attended, or it was really taken up strongly, because a lot of the cane farmers wanted to change, but they had no social structure within which to share and learn and go through change together. So you need to think about the systemic structures, and they can be physical structures as well, that will support your change process. Just because you think you can get some people to change or go on a successful project, if you're not supporting that with these systemic structures, then it's very hard to get that long-term change happening. And the third one, which you might call empowerment or learning, we call it in Australia capacity building, which is a really boring word. It sounds like a government term, which it is, but it actually is a really important term. But just think of it as empowerment. So that's where you're helping people to learn, to take control and to do things for themselves differently. So that's where you're helping them to build their knowledge, different understandings, different skills. So it's kind of a whole suite of things. You might call it learning. It's not really education in the traditional sense, but it's what we call capacity building or empowerment strategies. And it's really where people as a group learn to see things differently, learn to problem solve together differently, learn to come up with strategies differently as a group, and then learn how to put them into practice and solve their own problems. And in that, when you're applying those strategies, your job's just to facilitate their learning more than anything else. But it's a whole other group of kind of approaches you can use, if you like. And that's where a lot of our work is in this space with empowerment strategies. The thing about empowerment strategies is they take time. I can't just kind of put a sticker or get Taylor Swift to kind of promote it for me on YouTube or something. It's not going to build it up. Yeah, people have to take time. So I have to help people go through that learning process, and that takes time. It can take a couple of years, depending. I mean, you're seeing it now probably in the Ukraine, where they're learning to fight back against a much bigger adversary. The Ukrainian army is having to adapt and learn and build its capacity very quickly. But normally this kind of adaptive empowerment takes a bit longer. But in serious major change that's threatening, it can be quite quick. So I guess some last things to leave you with. Sorry, everyone, I didn't have any questions to get discussion in the last part of this, so I do apologise. Think about, with the people you're working with, what type of changes that your community is experiencing, and really map that out, because that's really important. It helps you to map out, why people are doing what they're doing, and help you take steps into that community and with that community. And then also think about, or try and identify, how people are responding to the changes. Are they angry? Are they scared? Are they open? Are they moving ahead? Are they really don't want to change? Where are they at? And how can you support them at where they're at? And also then that whole idea of where are people headed, and how are you helping people to collectively dream up that future? Are you doing that, or are you just coming in and imposing your future on them, saying, oh, look, just follow me. This is PROUT. It's all sorted. This is what it looks like. You'll have a free car. Everyone have a free car, and you can choose which color your car is. Or really, I mean, people have got to co-create their future. And that means, getting people's dreams and aspirations, and relevant dreams and aspirations, and drawing them out, and they're your dreams and aspirations. And then finally, what are the enabling forces that are supporting positive change, and what are the barriers that are hindering it? So this is this project, Life Interwoven. This is some Thai weavers, and you can see the ladies are quite old, and one of the barriers we have to this project is young people, and the other barrier is just having the support systems in place socially to help build these communities up. And one of the barriers is the demographics. People, or as Maheshwara said, young people are all leaving the rural areas. So how can you build kind of new models of economies where you haven't got any young people in the rural area? It ain't going to happen. So do we just get Stalin to force 2 million young people to go back to the countryside? I mean, it's not going to happen. But so you can sort of see, you've got to identify what your enabling and supporting things are. And then what structural, behavioural and empowerment strategies can you put in place? And this is, it's a big topic. I've only just touched on it, but basically you can design, if you like, you can co-design projects that have kind of this really good suite of different tactics and strategies that will help enable that change for your community. And when you do that, you tend to find more success when you get really deliberate about thinking that through, not just yourself, but with the people you're working with. All right, so I'm going to be quiet on that point. I'm going to shut up. So Maheshwara, sorry about tonight. I was a bit all over the shop. I've just left that one there as a last prompter. And so you've got less grey hair in that photo. So I touched that up earlier with what's it called? Adobe. So I did a little bit of a, she's turned off her camera. You can turn your camera back on there. Anyway, so I guess the question I just leave you with at the end is, what are you actually trying to do as a PROUT activist? If you are working as a PROUT change agent or working in community development and trying to use PROUT-based approaches, then I guess I'm just leaving you with this challenge as a question is, what are you actually trying to do? What elements of the PROUT model are you utilizing? And some of these other, what we call models for change, based a lot on human psychology and sociology, that are really effective. So I'll throw it open to you now. I'll be quiet. Hopefully you guys have got some food for thought. I really appreciate you putting in the time. And hopefully you've got a few ideas out of just the experiences that I've shared there of me and Sue. Righto, Maheshwar, everyone's asleep, I think, so that's all good.
Does anyone want to comment on the last question, to share some experiences?
No worries. And I forgot, you guys are all in the morning there or something, aren't you? It's late here, but it's morning there. So, yeah, any comments or questions? Feel free to chuck them in. Now's the time. G'day, Pradeepa.
Hi. Yeah, I would just like to thank you. It was really, really good and really important for what is happening here in Portugal, because we are doing a project with the community and it's about changes, and we are working about a block level planning model.
Yeah.
So it's something that every topic that we mentioned here, it's really important and inspiring. It's a big challenge to have all that in mind, but we are working on it, just really going deep in what are the needs of the community, what are the main problems, and many of them were mentioned here, and now think together in these solutions. But all these challenges of bringing people that are so different together and to have the same vision, it's something that it's not in one day or two. No, it's something that we are feeling that is something needs to first to bring a movement that, okay, we want to do this together, because it's already, so it's like kind of 3 municipalities together. It's about 79,000 people in the region, but but I guess that's the way, because we are already feeling maybe in different ways, but people want to cooperate. People know, because we, as Maheshwara said, we are in the same area. So it's a rural area. Young people are leaving, and many of difficulties, economical, social difficulties are related with that. And people know that only together we can go ahead. So I think we have this in our hands now, and we are excited.
Look, there's lots of, it's a massive topic. There's quite a lot of different models you can use. I call them models or tools you can use for different stages of these kind of projects. And it's such a big topic, you know, obviously can't touch it all tonight. But one of the things that I've really learnt working with farmer communities, particularly in the last 5 years, because one of the big things is, who do you focus on to help bring a community with you? You often focus on the leaders and and that's really important. And you've kind of got to work out, it's a bit like, I read a book about French shepherds that take all the sheep up into the French Alps, and they take a big group of sheep up, and they often focus on the lead sheep and the last sheep, and they don't worry about too much all the sheep in between, because the lead sheep, if you worry about them, they're the ones sort of leading the rest of the sheep, and you don't want the ones at the back to go too far behind. All the rest of them, they'll just kind of move. So you just worry about the front and the back. And it kind of helps you in a way, not that you don't want to look after the people in the middle, but by working with the leaders, and we have different types of leaders that we then categorize, because some of them are too far in front, and other people won't follow them. They're just too far. So yeah, but if you work with that kind of early adopters or that early pioneering group, they often bring other people with them. And so yeah, there's quite a lot of tactics you can use, because you've got such a big project. You're going to have to focus your effort at some point. But if you focus it strategically, then the groups you work with will bring other groups with them, I guess is the point I'm trying to say. But that requires you have to target what you're doing, and you have to map out the community for that. And part of that is knowing the people, which obviously you're starting to do, or you do already. But yeah, so there's strategies you can apply, because we can't do everything. And so you have to really, target certain things and that will that'll enable that broader movement behind, if you like.
Yeah.
But yeah, look forward to finding out more about it, coming over there at some point for this summer bash or whatever you guys have there, where you all just sit around and drink smoothies and do whatever. So yeah, it'll be good.
Wonderful. Yes, please. Thank you.
Anyone has any more comments?
I just wanted to thank you, Dharmamitra, and maybe it needs a bit of like a follow-up, a second part, because this last bit we didn't have time to really.
Look, it is a big topic, Sarah Davy. And the other thing too is like there's quite specific examples that I could share. I'm just mindful some of them are probably better for a more specific what do you want to call it, in-depth training rather than just a general thing going on YouTube. It's probably just a different context. But yeah, it is. Look, it's a really important skill set to develop for yourself, I guess. And I've often thought about what are the different skills that I need as to help help with community development. And they fall into a couple of categories. One is group facilitation skills, and then the other one is obviously supporting change. They're the two main areas of skill, but then the third one can be a technical skill, which whatever it is, it might be health, or it might be Pradeepa's case, economics or social, regional economies or whatever, or food systems or whatever it is. But you've got facilitation skills, group facilitation skills, and then you've got kind of change management, change support skills. I won't say change management, because in my opinion, you can't manage change. You can just give it a bit of a nudge. If you think of managing change, then you'll be proved wrong, I reckon myself. And that's in organizations, they talk about change management quite a lot. But your change facilitation skills, that's a whole kind of area as well. And then the third one is whatever your passion is, I guess. So some people it's food or health or whatever it might be, social justice. You'll obviously have your own skill set around that. But yeah, it is a big topic. So thanks for bearing with me, because we went quite a long time on it.
I'd also like to thank you, and it's okay, personally, I think that the reason why you went a bit longer than expected is because it's a big topic and you're passionate about it. Of course, you want to not to just skim over it, but actually go and give some of it some juice, So I think at least the ones who stayed. I think for those that stayed, it was really important to hear, and in my case, it was also very, very inspiring. So
cool.
if somebody else has, if anybody else has some comment, please say it now, or else we can close the session.
No.
If nobody else,
everyone's had enough. Yeah. Well, thanks, Maheshwar, and thanks everyone for having us on.
See you next time.
Namaskar. Thank you. Look forward to having more session like this. Thank you very much.
Look forward to more from you, David or Dharmamitra.
No worries. We'll get Sue to talk as well next time when she's dyed her hair black. When she's dyed her hair black again. Thanks, everyone.